I'm Bill Bradshaw, and like Chris, I came to Oregon some 30 plus years ago from a postdoc at Harvard. My topic to begin with is going to be about biological timing mechanisms. So what are biological timing mechanisms? It's all about when to do things. First of all, we, like the rest of the world around us, have a daily circadian clock that tells us when to get up in the morning, when to spread our flowers, well, if you're a plant, when to do things in general during the day. There is also the seasonal photoperiodic timer that assesses the length of day or night and essentially tells organisms what time of year it is. Both of these physiological mechanisms are internal to the organism, and they both share the property of anticipation. They enable the organism to prepare physiologically for future events, both on a daily basis and on a seasonal basis. You cannot wait for the seasons to change to prepare for them. Bears eat nuts and berries and put on fat long before they go into hibernation. And the cue that they use from the environment is length of day. You can think, well, summers are warmer than winters, why not just use temperature? But temperature is actually a relatively crude cue. Temperature varies from week to week, month to month, and is a very inexact cue of future seasonal change. On the other hand, the day length where you're standing right now today was the same 10,000 years ago as it is today and will be 10,000 years into the future. Seasonal change in preparing for future seasons is a life and death decision. When to grow, when to develop, when to migrate, when to go into hibernation. And if you are going to bet your life on predicting the future through day length or temperature, which would you use? So in sum, the length of day is the most reliable cue for future seasonal change through evolutionary time. Historically, the daily circadian clock and the seasonal photoperiodic timer have been considered as a single integral mechanism. That is, the daily circadian clock forms the necessary mechanistic basis for the seasonal photoperiodic timer. Other schools of thought have proposed that they're not connected at all. And indeed, the theoretical and experimental results from our lab showing that they have evolved independently over the climatic gradient of North America has really changed the way people in biological clocks and biological timekeeping have approached their research. We have proposed that a single or a few genes in the daily circadian clock can be giving a time cue, a time reference point to the seasonal photoperiodic timer. That is, one or a few genes in the circadian clock as they cycle, independently and incidentally of their role in the circadian clock, give a time reference point to a separate independent photoperiodic timer, which takes that time cue from the daily circadian clock. We do know that regardless of how it turns out, this is a very important distinction to make, because the health and well-being of human populations, the agricultural plants and animals upon which we depend, and conservation measures to preserve and conserve the world of nature about us as we know it are dependent upon these two timing mechanisms. If you have surgery, the probability of your surviving this surgery depends upon time of day. 3 Mile Island and the Exxon Valdez disaster occurred at a time of day when human performance is known to be at a minimum. And even human beings are not immune to the vagaries of seasonal change. The month you were born determines to some extent what your life expectancy is. Type 2 diabetes tends to have a late winter, early spring onset. And more recently, they have found that breast cancer tends to be diagnosed primarily in the spring and fall. so that human beings, as well as the world around us, are dependent upon these two timing mechanisms and how they might integrate genetically as well as physiologically. The third aspect of our research that we are currently emphasizing concerns global warming. Few scientists would question the fact that the Earth is warming and is doing so at a rate that is faster than it has done in the previous 1,000 years. Chris and I sat down and said, we've been working with Wyomia smithii for over 3 decades, during which global warming has been taking place. If global warming were having an impact on Wyomia, how we would expect it to do so. And what we have found when we look back at our own data is that northern populations are becoming more southern-like in their response to day length. And this shift in response to day length breeds true in the lab. That is, that recent rapid climate change has penetrated to the level of the gene. This was a very shocking revelation to people involved with global warming because it changed the focus from the simple direct effects of temperature to those involved in climate and seasonality. We then asked, which is more important in determining fitness of natural populations, temperature or response to day length? And for these experiments, we used our computer-controlled rooms that are like no others in the world. These are rooms that the University of Oregon has set us up with, in which we can simulate any climate. We can reproduce any climate from the tropics to the Arctic, so that we can put Wyomia smithii in its native climate here in the lab, but under controlled conditions, where we can manipulate temperature and day length independently and are able to tease apart their contribution to fitness in different populations over the climatic gradient of North America. What we have found is that for temperate populations of Wyomia smithii, warming is better. They are living in nature at temperatures which are below their thermal optimum. They like it when it's warmer. On the other hand, if we change the day length, the annual change in day length that they see, they do poorly, populations decline, and ultimately go extinct. Therefore, we have concluded that it is the growing season and length of the growing season, that is climate, is driving genetic and therefore evolutionary change in natural populations. This conclusion subsequently was confirmed or has been confirmed in insects, plants, birds, and mammals. Why does the distinction matter? Why the shift in focus from global warming to climate change? Well, first of all, organisms are organized, and they are organized in time as well as space. Mosquito-borne diseases are moving from the tropics and subtropics into the temperate zones of North America and the United States. Also, the extended growing season makes it easier for diseases to be transmitted from one human being to another. This also impinges agricultural and conservation efforts, the plants and animals on which we depend for our livelihood and also for our enjoyment of nature are impacted the same way. In sum, Chris and I are 2 independent scientists. We have complementary viewpoints and skills, and we have used the somewhat small, wimpy, otherwise nondescript, but totally magnificent mosquito, Wyomia smithii, to resolve issues and move on to new and compelling questions. We have used throughout our career the most cutting-edge genetic and genomic tools available. As Chris said, unless you force yourself to confront what is new, you're unlikely to obtain results that are truly transformational and move discovery forward.